Hello, this is Dr. Troy-Richardson. Hello, how are you doing, Miss Baker? You have Alexis Pittman, a Prospect Seminary student? Okay. And she has some additional questions following her tour of Hood today? Yes, I would be more than happy to speak with her. Please send it to my office. Oh, no problem. You're welcome. Bye-bye. Hello, Miss Alexis. Please come in, have a seat. I'm Dr. Troy-Richardson. It is a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you, Dr. Troy-Richardson, and thank you for taking the time to meet with me.
Miss Baker shared with me that you had toured Hood Seminary today. What did you think?
The tour was great and informative, but I still have a few more questions that I would like to ask to help me figure out if seminary is right for me, and if so, how to choose a seminary that is a good fit for me.
Oh, absolutely. What questions do you have today?
Well, besides the degree, school, and teaching format, what are the other things that I need to think about if I'm interested in pursuing theological studies?
Absolutely. That is a great question, Miss Alexis. Well, first, I would suggest you think about the different areas of discernment. Let us just start with your vocational path. What do you hope to do with your degree in conjunction with your denominational affiliation? Will likely be the biggest factor in your discernment process, since how you will use the degree will be greatly influenced by your vocational path. And to assist you in exploring your vocational path, I would like to give you what I call the mission and mandate exercise for you to begin working on. Here are some questions to consider as you do your research. What is the stated mission of your denomination, or what is the stated mission of your intended vocational area? What is mandate or expectation for those wishing to be an authorized leader in your religious community or for being certified in that field? What are the types or levels of authorization? And what are the name requirements of your intended vocation within that institution? And what are the implied requirements? You see, the mission and mandate exercise is intended to get you to start thinking about what is required of you for a particular vocation. Understand that there are explicit and implicit expectations for every vocation, and help you draw, and it kind of helps you draw out your own commitments, values, and priorities so you can see them in relationship to the vocation and context that you are imagining. Do you have any questions regarding discerning your vocational path?
No, ma'am. I think the mission and mandate exercise will be extremely helpful.
Great. Now that we have looked at discerning the vocational path, let us move on. The next area of discernment that I would suggest you think about is denominational affiliation. See, your denomination can have an extensive impact on your vocational path and education. If you are thinking about ordained ministry, your denomination affiliation will impact funding, theological schools, degree programs, and course requirements. Most denominations prefer you begin the discernment process with your local church and its leaders before applying to a theological school. The best place to start inquiring about the process is with your pastor.
Dr. Troy-Richardson, Is it a requirement that I go through my denominational affiliation?
This is a great question. See, this is a question that I get asked quite often, as a matter of fact. I would strongly recommend it. See, let me tell you why, Miss Alexis. Taking your denominational affiliation seriously, it is one of the first steps toward pursuing ordained ministry in that tradition. Do you have any additional questions regarding denominational affiliation?
No, ma'am. That was helpful.
Well, the last area of discernment that I would suggest you think about is listening and watching for God. What is God's will for my life? In my experience, this is how many people situate their vocational process. However, this is not the most helpful question to be asking at this stage of the discernment process. The question is just too theologically complex. Most of us do not know ourselves deeply enough to make that assessment. The better question to ask is, what is God's invitation to me? What is the grace that I am being offered with this invitation? The language of invitation makes space for us to make our own response to God's invitation. This will ensure that the outcome grows out of our working together with God. It requires us to listen for and pay attention to God's invitation, and it requires us to claim our own voice in the process. Your denomination and theological school will join you in listening for God's invitation to you.
Wow, this is some great information.
Thank you. Those were just a few suggested things to think about regarding the different areas of discernment. Now, Miss Alexis, I want to move on to the next area of who decides what, and suggest just a few things for you to think about there as well. Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. The deciding is not solely your responsibility, but you have a role, the denomination has a role, and the theological school has a role in the decision process of theological education. I will begin with your role in discerning and deciding on theological education. For those that do not belong to a denomination that requires acceptance into a clergy candidacy program before applying to seminary, or you are not interested in ordained ministry of any kind, the decision to apply to a theological school, it is up to you. See, if you later decide to pursue ordination within a denomination after starting or completing the degree, the ordaining body may still impose additional requirements. Do not assume that your denomination will ordain or authorize you just because you have the right degree and believe that you are called by God.
I never thought about that.
Well, Miss Alexis, next I would recommend thinking about the denomination's role. Some denominations will not permit you to attend seminary or support you in a seminary program until you have been pre-approved as a candidate for ordained ministry. Roman Catholic seminaries fall into this category. Once you are approved as a candidate for ordained ministry, the bishop will tell you the seminary where you can apply. The Episcopal and Orthodox denominations proceed in a similar manner. However, most Protestant denominations keep the process of the ordination track separate from the process of applying to seminary. Protestant denominations prefer you engage their approval before applying to seminary. But once you are approved as a candidate for ordained ministry, you have a significant amount of freedom about which school you can attend.
Well, my preference is to stay in North Carolina if possible. I see my denomination has approved seminaries in Salisbury, Charlotte, and Durham.
Sounds like you are affiliated with the United Methodist Church. And yes, Salisbury, one of those seminaries would be here at Hood Theological Seminaries. And we do, the United Methodist Church does have 2 additional approved seminaries in Charlotte and Durham. That is correct. But also, Alexis, I would suggest thinking about the theological school's role in the discerning and deciding process. Just as you and your denomination has a role, so does your theological school play a role. Each theological school has its own independent application process, even if it's associated with a denomination. However, theological schools do work closely with denominations regarding qualifications for ordained ministry. This is also true in the reverse. Just because a person has been accepted into a theological school's degree program does not guarantee that the denomination will accept that person into their candidacy process as a candidate for ordained ministry. You see, it is still your responsibility, Miss Alexis, to know how much input your denomination will require in the educational process. Do you have any questions regarding who decides what and the different roles involved in the discerning and decision process?
No, ma'am, Dr. Troy-Richardson. I understand.
Great. Well, Miss Alexis, the last thing I would encourage you to think about are pertinent degrees. I will share just a few things for you to think about to help you choose the degree that is best for you. If you know your general vocational path and the requirements of your denomination or intended ministry, selecting a degree is not too complicated. For example, those interested in becoming an ordained pastor of a church should be looking at the Master of Divinity degree. Unless your denomination allows you to take a general 2-year theological master's degree. If that is the case, then you will have more options to choose from. There are certain ministerial paths in some denominations that require a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. For example, board certification with the Association of Professional Chaplains currently requires both a bachelor's degree and a graduate level theology degree with at least 72 credit hours. If you have an unclear sense of your vocational path, but want to begin theological studies, you have a couple of choices as well. You can select the degree that has the most flexibility for future use, or you can apply to be an unclassified student. You see, most theological schools will allow qualified applicants to take 3 to 5 courses without applying to a specific degree program. These students are considered unclassified. This approach allows the student to get a taste of theological studies without committing to a particular degree or vocational path. It is important to note that if you decide to begin as an unclassified student, you will not be eligible for any federal loan programs, and it is very unlikely to receive any type of scholarship funding. You see, Miss Alexis, these are some of the things that I suggest you think about besides the degree, school, and teaching format. Do you have any questions regarding pertinent degrees or anything we have discussed thus far?
Yes, Dr. Troy-Richardson. After listening to you talk about pertinent degrees, I do have a question. Once I decide on which degree is best for me, is it best for me to work on the degree part-time or full-time?
Wow, Mr. Alexis, that is an excellent question. But to be honest, that is not my area of expertise. But I think that Dr. Wiley would be the best person to answer these questions and any related questions regarding that. Do you have a few minutes to speak with Dr. Wiley?
Yes, I would appreciate that.
Certainly. Please give me just one moment to check and see if Dr. Wiley is available. I'm just going to simply instant message him very quickly to see what his status is, if you don't mind. Thank you. Miss Alexis, Dr. Wiley is available to speak with you. I just reached out to him. I will show you to his office.
Thank you so much, Dr. Troy-Richardson. I appreciate you taking the time to speak with me and giving me some suggestions to think about.
You're welcome, Miss Alexis. It was my pleasure. I will show you to Dr. Wiley's office.